this year, my girlfriend and her sister inherited their grandmother's cabin, a truly beautiful sanctuary. It sits right on a private lake, steeped in the kind of quiet solitude their grandmother cherished for 9 months of every year. Since June, my brother-in-law and I have been making the 2-hour pilgrimage every weekend, pouring sweat into the place to bring it back to life. We've patched the leaky roof, replaced rotted floorboards, and tackled the biggest project, adding a second bedroom. We built a proper pier, too, the kind the kids now love launching themselves off of. The work has been non-stop, but having friends and family drop by, people sharing condolences, neighbors stopping by out of curiosity, it made the grueling labor feel less isolated. We were careful. We put up a clear private property sign right at the entrance, and for the most part, people respected the boundary. The most notable incident we had was minor. A Ford F-150 pulled into the driveway one afternoon, idled for a moment, and then reversed back out. We only knew the model because, thankfully, my sister-in-law had insisted on installing a security camera. That camera, positioned to watch the front of the cabin, would soon become the focal point of a creeping unease. Last month, I made the trip solo. When I unlocked the front door, I was hit by it immediately. An overwhelming, stale smell of cheap cigarette smoke. It was thick, offensive, and utterly foreign. Nobody in our family smokes. I found nothing but some dirty dishes in the sink, yet the distinct, visceral feeling that someone had been inside the cabin, not just passing through, was impossible to shake. That weekend changed everything. The scent of that cheap smoke triggered an obsession. I spent weeks scrolling through the security camera footage in my free time, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Hours of an empty driveway, an undisturbed cabin facade. The motion-activated light would flare on, sending my heart jumping, only for the footage to reveal a passing deer or raccoon. The stillness was maddening. This past weekend, we decided to tackle the brutal job of re-roofing. We left an hour earlier than usual, hoping to beat the midday sun. That slight change in our routine, that single hour, must have thrown the intruder's timing off completely. As I walked inside, I heard it, a loud slam from the back of the house. Someone had heard our car and bolted. I didn't give chase. I had no idea if they were dangerous or armed. By the time I got to the back patio, whoever it was had vanished into the dense woods. The evidence, however, was glaring. The sliding glass door on that side of the cabin was unlocked. The chilling realization is how much this person knew. This wasn't a random opportunist. They knew our exact, down to the hour schedule. That level of precision is how they slipped in and out for weeks, maybe months, dodging the lens of the security camera with surgical consistency. They must know the camera is there. I'm seriously considering a second camera pointing at that back door, even though I know my sister-in-law will have the inevitable "I told you so." But the bigger dilemma is my girlfriend. This cabin is her last cherished link to her grandmother. If I tell her that a persistent, calculated creep has been invading her safe space, she'll never want to go back. Yet, I am terrified of running into them again. I feel completely trapped. It was the summer of 1991. I was a young Air Force officer, finally home from Desert Storm, and my parents had rented an old cabin on a lake nearby to celebrate. It had a strange, saddle-dipped roof, but it was perfect, a place for swimming, fishing, and family. Near the end of my visit, my brother's friends came over. We were all sitting around the kitchen table, sharing old stories from our childhoods in that farming country. One of my brother's friends, a smoker, had his pack of cigarettes and a big familiar lighter sitting right on the table next to me. I wasn't focused on it, but it was there, in the corner of my eye. Then, without a warning, that big lighter shot across the room. It flew right past my friend, as if powerfully flicked by an invisible finger. We stared at each other, instantly shocked, trying to figure out which of us had done the trick. Neither of us had touched it. No one was close enough. Before we could even process the physics of the moment, we heard it. A distinct, quiet, clicking sound. It came from an old china cabinet pressed against the wall. We all turned. The latch had opened. The cabinet door slowly, deliberately swung open by itself. The atmosphere in that cabin changed instantly. The air felt heavy, almost electric, thick with a palpable, unseen presence. None of us slept well that night. Fast forward 10 years. I was married now, with 2 young kids, still serving. My mother had moved, and we needed a place to stay while visiting. Unbelievably, the only cabin available on that lake was the exact same one. I told my wife the whole strange story, but neither of us were scared, so we rented it anyway. Nothing happened until the very last night. We put our children to bed in the living room with the nightlight on. As I was drifting into that half-waking, half-sleeping state, I heard something soft hit the floor near the end of our bed. I figured it was my shorts, which I'd left draped on the footboard. Then, just seconds later, I felt the unmistakable pressure of someone sitting down on the edge of the mattress. My wife startled awake at the very same instant. She later told me She'd felt something like a small hand gently moving up the side of the bed, which is why she immediately thought one of our children.
I flipped on the light. The room was empty. We rushed into the living room. Our kids were sound asleep, undisturbed. On the way back, I saw my shorts in the middle of the floor. I knew I heard them fall, I said. My wife gave me a confused look and pointed to a chair 4 feet away. No, I moved those to the chair before I came to bed. Something had thrown my shorts into the middle of the room, then sat on our bed to wake us up.
Those are the only 2 paranormal experiences of my entire life, and they both happened in that same cabin, witnessed by others. I was spooked, yes. Something unseen was moving things and interacting with us, but I was never scared. It was not threatening or evil, just profoundly weird. If I ever get the chance to rent that place again, I'm definitely going back. Late August last year, in southern Australia, my mate and I were conducting a controlled burn on my property to clear dead trees. It was evening, maybe 7 p.m., but there was still plenty of light. I was alone for a moment. My mate had gone back to the cabin about 100 meters through the scrub to grab more matches. I was facing the patchy eucalyptus forest, where the trees were spaced just enough to see a good distance in. That's when I heard it. A loud crack, the unmistakable sound of a thick branch snapping clean off a tree, echoing through the bush. I scanned the trees immediately, and my eyes locked onto one particular eucalyptus about 30 or 40 meters away. It was shaking. It wasn't wind. There was none. Everything else was motionless. This was a solid tree, maybe 8 to 10 meters tall. To make a tree that size move like that, something had to be pushing it with serious, non-human force. A cold, heavy unease settled over me. I stood there, frozen, trying to process the impossibility of what I was witnessing. The tree stopped. For 2 seconds, absolute silence. Then I saw it. Something was standing right next to the trunk. My mind tried to force a rationalization. A person in a white t-shirt, maybe another trespasser. But in the next instant, that delusion shattered. This thing, whatever it was, grabbed the trunk and began to shake it again. But this time, it was aggressive. The tree thrashed back and forth with a jerky, erratic violence that looked utterly, terrifyingly wrong. I was locked in place by a fear that had no name. Then, thank God, I heard my friend's voice behind me. "What are you staring at?" I spun around, gasped, and pointed. "Something is shaking that tree." We both looked back, and the shaking had stopped. Everything was still. My friend was about to ask what I'd seen when we both heard it. A massive, final crack. We looked back in unison. The tree was falling. It came crashing down in a series of earth-shaking snaps, the sound echoing through the evening forest. We didn't hesitate. We turned and sprinted back to the cabin as fast as we could run. This happened when I was 8 or 9 years old. Early one morning, maybe 5 or 6 a.m. Our house was crowded. My mom, my brother, her boyfriend, and his ex-girlfriend who was staying with us. It was chaos getting ready for school and work, and my brother was about to drive my mom to her job. I got dressed and walked out the door with my backpack hours before I should have left for school. The woman, my mom's boyfriend's ex-girlfriend, saw me. She was at the sink, washing dishes, and she just watched me leave. She knew my brother and mom had already gone. She knew it wasn't safe for me to be out alone in the dark. But she said nothing, just gave me a mean look. Once outside, I saw no car and realized they had left without me. I started crying, calling out for my mom, crossing the street. That's when I noticed the big trees nearby, and standing beneath them were 2 guys. They were skinny, in their early 20s, wearing old, dirty clothes, but it was their faces that chilled me. Both were fixed in these creepy, stretched smiles that felt profoundly wrong. One of them saw me crying and called out, his voice unsettlingly familiar. "We know where your mom is." He gestured, inviting me to follow, and then both of them started walking back into the thick bushes. I don't know why, but some tiny, powerful instinct inside me screamed, "No!" I turned and ran back to the house as fast as my legs would carry me. I am so thankful for that instinctive refusal. It was still dark outside, and I was just a little kid. I still get scared thinking about what those 2 men were planning to do to me. This might not be the most explosive story, but it's a painful reminder of how vulnerable we are, and how important it is for parents to watch their children carefully. Stay safe out there, everyone.